The best place to start is really about retention and tricky situations you can get to when it comes to data retention in the cloud.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first thing I think we want to kind of talk about is really a couple of examples, right, of issues I guess you could run into when it comes to data retention in the cloud. We look at, obviously in the case of AWS, right, you have tons of different services, tons of different features where you have the ability to save and maintain persistent data in the cloud. And that can, right, you're enabling teams to quickly spin up, S3 buckets, EC2 instances, and then, hundreds of other different types of resources. One of the issues when it comes to actually protecting that data is, do you actually, are you doing it correctly or in a way that's appropriate or commensurate to the type of resource it is? So one thing that we see across a lot of our customers is this idea of, another team kind of configures, let's say, an EC2 instance, and then that's backed by EBS volumes, and then has a backup policy, right, where they might have a retention policy that's way too long, and let's say multiple years, right, where you could have hundreds and hundreds of snapshots that kind of stack up. And then a situation where, right, people are afraid to even touch that because they don't know, maybe that resource does need it or maybe not, but you end up with mounting cost and little understanding of like if you actually can delete those snapshots or not. So I'm wondering, Andy, if you see any types of issues like that with retention going out of control on AWS.
I do. I definitely see kind of folks kind of retaining everything forever because either they haven't gotten. So I work a lot in the financial space, so we see a lot of folks. So a lot of what my customers do is they'll be getting like compliance sort of guidelines in terms of, okay, what does compliance say we need to do? And in some cases, when compliance isn't really giving any guidance, they'll go forever. So when in doubt, retain forever, right? And there's a cost involved in that. But I've also seen with customers in my industry as well as other industries that just don't back up, right? Either it's not on their checklist when they're doing app migrations, right, or they're doing modernization, or for whatever reason, sometimes it's too expensive. Other times they just don't have the staff, right? Just simple things like, are you protected? And then oftentimes we'll come to customers and say, okay, where is backup in this migration plan? Once you're in AWS, and sometimes it's, oh, that's right, we need to back this up. And as we start getting more complex now, right, we start looking at customers' data lakes are always a big conversation these days, and running analytics tools on top of that. It's like, all right, how are you protecting this? And S3 backups, I'd say in the past 2 or 3 years, S3 was always great. S3 customers always would think about protecting S3 with replication or versioning or object lock, which is great, but especially with concerns around ransomware, for example, right? Cyber resilience, having the ability to go back to a specific point in time with S3s is a huge advantage for our customers. It's something they want to be able to do. If they've got to go before somebody introduced a piece of ransomware or some sort of a cyber event. But then I also see the customer says, they're new to AWS and they say, well, S3's got 11 nines of durability, which means we're protected, right? And they don't understand the shared responsibility model. Yes, you're protected on our side of the shared responsibility model. We're doing everything we can on the AWS side to ensure that nothing on the AWS, nothing infrastructure-wise is going to cause your data to get lost, right? We're replicating your data across 3 or more availability zones with S3, but that also doesn't really replace the fact that if somebody does a delete, right? If somebody has a properly authenticated delete object API, whether that comes from a piece of ransomware, a bad actor, or somebody that's mistakenly, fat fingering something, as I like to say, we don't know the difference in AWS, right? A properly authenticated delete object API is still a properly authenticated delete object. So we're going to honor that request if it's properly authenticated. So that 11 nines of durability has no impact on it. So that's only going to help if the dinosaur eats an availability zone or something like that. So which we hope doesn't happen anytime soon. But like Werner Vogel's always like to say, everything fails all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And you make a really great point where it's this concept of shared responsibility model, security of the cloud versus security in the cloud. And this idea that like you could have all the replication in the world, but if you replicate the same error, the same misconfiguration, the same bad act, it's replicated everywhere. It's not acted from.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really great point. And it brings us to this idea of saying, we could have all of these features available to us, right? That let's say within AWS and within our toolbox that let us create, right, a durable or a data protection strategy. But what is it worth if we're not actually looking, holistically at all of our data as an organization and understanding if the things that should be protected are protected for the correct amount of time?